So you think ocean shipping is a business about ships? It isn't. The real product is space. An ordinary metal container can be worth thousands of dollars to a shipping company, not because the steel box itself is valuable, but because someone is willing to pay to move whatever is inside it across the world. That changes the entire way you should look at the industry. A shipping line isn't really selling containers. It is selling access to limited space on a moving global network. Imagine a manufacturer in one country needs to move thousands of products to another. The company doesn't need to own a ship. It needs somewhere on a ship, and that space has a price. When plenty of ships are available, the price can fall. When too many customers compete for too few slots, the price can explode. The same container that cost $500 on one voyage might cost $5,000 on another. Nothing about the box changed. The route may look similar. The ship may even be similar. What changed was scarcity. That is the first secret of ocean shipping. Capacity is the product, and scarcity determines what that product is worth. Now scale that idea across an entire vessel. A large container ship can carry thousands of boxes on a single voyage. Each box represents a paying customer. Instead of taking one expensive trip for one customer, the shipping line combines thousands of shipments onto one moving platform. That is where the economics become enormous. Imagine a ship carrying 10,000 paying containers. Suppose each container generates an average of $2,000. That creates roughly $20 million in revenue from one voyage, and that number immediately sounds like a fortune. But revenue is not profit. Before the shipping company keeps anything, the voyage has to survive an enormous cost structure. The fuel bill starts climbing. A crew has to be paid. Cranes have to load thousands of containers. Ports charge for handling the vessel. And every hour the ship spends waiting can create another expense. The ship may already have customers who have paid millions, but the business is still burning cash before the vessel has even reached open water. Fuel is one of the largest pieces of that equation. These vessels are enormous. Their engines can burn fuel continuously for days or weeks. The farther they travel, the more fuel they need. The faster they travel, the more fuel they consume. So a voyage can generate millions in revenue while a huge portion of that money disappears into the fuel tanks, and that creates one of the strangest strategies in the industry. Sometimes going slower makes more money. A giant ship pushing through the ocean at high speed requires dramatically more engine power. Reduce the speed. The voyage takes longer, but fuel consumption can fall substantially. If the fuel savings are greater than the cost of the extra time, arriving later can actually increase profit. The ship eventually reaches port, but the spending doesn't stop. The carrier may pay for berthing, terminal handling, cranes, cargo movement, and other port services. And the same process happens again at the other end of the journey. That means every container creates revenue. But every container also creates another chain of handling costs, and the ocean crossing itself is only part of the journey. Before the box ever reaches the ship, it may travel by truck or rail. After the ship arrives, another truck or train may carry it inland. The strongest shipping companies can therefore sell more than ocean transportation. They can sell the entire journey. That is a much bigger product, because an empty slot earns nothing. The ship still needs fuel, the crew still needs to be paid. The vessel still needs maintenance, the port still charges for services. So once a ship is scheduled to sail, every additional paying container can help spread those huge fixed costs across more customers. That is why utilization matters so much. A full ship can be incredibly efficient. A half-empty ship can become a financial problem, and then the industry faces another strange problem. Trade is rarely balanced. A ship can arrive packed with loaded containers, but far fewer customers may need space on the return voyage. The ship still has to go back. Empty containers still have to move to places where exporters need them. So shipping companies sometimes spend money moving steel boxes that contain nothing. That is repositioning, and it quietly destroys efficiency. The same ship can therefore have completely different economics in opposite directions. One direction might be packed with customers fighting for limited capacity. The return voyage might have empty slots everywhere. The carrier may lower the price simply to put some cargo into those spaces. Same ship, same ocean, same ports. Completely different economics. Now imagine that imbalance spreading across the entire industry. Thousands of companies need to move cargo, but the number of available ship slots is limited. Shipping companies cannot instantly build enough new vessels to satisfy that demand. Customers start competing for capacity. Freight rates rise. Suddenly, the same ship crossing the same route becomes dramatically more profitable, and this is where the real money can appear. The ship was already scheduled to sail. The fuel cost was already largely committed. The crew was already working. The port fees were already coming. But if customers suddenly pay twice as much for the same space, many of those costs do not double. Revenue can rise much faster than expenses, and the margin expands. But the reverse is equally powerful. If too many ships are chasing too little cargo, carriers start fighting for customers. Freight rates fall. Every company wants to keep its vessels moving, but fuel still costs money. Crew costs money, maintenance costs money, ports cost money, financing still has to be paid. A massive fleet that created enormous profits during a boom can suddenly become one of the most expensive assets on the planet during a downturn. Sometimes, the smartest move is to do nothing. A half-empty ship can burn enormous amounts of fuel while generating too little revenue to justify the voyage. So, carriers may cancel sailings. They may temporarily idle vessels. And by removing capacity from the market, they can sometimes prevent freight rates from falling even further. That tells you something important about this business. Profit is not always created by moving more cargo. Sometimes it is protected by moving less. And then comes the asset that makes ocean shipping so capital intensive: the ship itself. A modern container vessel can cost well over $100 million. The largest and most advanced ships can require even more. That means a shipping company may control an asset worth a fortune before a single container generates revenue. Many companies finance these vessels for years, so when freight rates collapse, the debt doesn't suddenly disappear. The asset may be earning less, but the financial obligation remains. That is one reason shipping can become so dangerous during weak markets. But a carrier doesn't always have to buy the ship. It can charter one. Instead of spending enormous capital up front, the shipping line pays another owner for the right to use the vessel for an agreed period. The shipping company gets capacity, the ship owner gets rental income, and suddenly the vessel itself becomes a product. But chartering has its own market. When plenty of vessels are available, charter rates can remain relatively affordable. When cargo demand surges and almost every ship is already working, available vessels become scarce. Operators start competing for whatever capacity remains. Charter rates rise. The exact same ship can become dramatically more valuable without changing anything physically. That creates another problem. A carrier might lock in an expensive charter for months or even years, then freight rates collapse, revenue falls, but the charter payment stays locked under the contract. The ship keeps costing money while earning less. A decision that looked brilliant during the boom can become a financial burden during the downturn. So what is better? Own the ship or charter it. Ownership requires enormous capital. But when charter prices explode, the owner already controls the vessel. Chartering requires far less money up front, but someone else owns the asset and can capture the benefit when the market becomes tight. Neither strategy removes risk. They simply place the risk in different locations. That is why strong shipping companies often combine both. And regardless of ownership structure, fuel remains one of the most important costs. These vessels travel thousands of miles while pushing enormous weight through water. A single voyage can consume an astonishing amount of fuel. If energy prices rise, the same voyage instantly becomes more expensive. The carrier may move the same containers, earn the same freight revenue, and still make much less money. That is why even a small improvement in fuel efficiency across a large fleet can create millions in savings. Slow steaming becomes powerful again. Reduce speed, reduce fuel burn. Accept a longer journey, and potentially keep more money from every voyage. The same logic explains why shipping companies built increasingly larger vessels. A giant ship costs more to operate, but it can carry thousands more containers. Now the crew, fuel, port costs, maintenance, and many other voyage expenses can be distributed across more paying boxes. If the ship stays full, the cost per container can fall. Scale creates an advantage, but scale creates a weakness too. A giant ship needs enormous amounts of cargo. When demand is strong, thousands of containers spread those fixed costs efficiently. When demand falls, empty slots earn nothing. The vessel still needs fuel, crew, maintenance, port services, and financing. The bigger the ship, the more capacity the company must fill. So the same scale that creates incredible efficiency can become a burden remarkably quickly. And then there is the port. A ship doesn't simply arrive and leave. It pays for terminal handling, berthing cargo operations, and other services. If everything works efficiently, thousands of containers can move quickly and the vessel can continue toward its next destination. But congestion changes the equation. A ship waiting outside a crowded port may spend days doing almost nothing while costs continue. The vessel isn't generating another voyage, the crew is still working. Financing continues, maintenance continues, time is being lost, and in shipping, lost time is another form of lost capacity. That is why carriers sometimes add surcharges when fuel becomes more expensive. When ports become congested, when particular routes become more difficult, the carrier can place additional charges on the customer bill to recover part of those rising costs. But shipping lines cannot charge whatever they want. Competition keeps them under pressure. When too many ships are chasing too little cargo, carriers compete for the same containers. One line cuts its rate, another responds. Prices fall. The ships become fuller, but profitability can disappear. At some point, a carrier can move thousands of containers and still make almost nothing. When freight rates fall too far, carriers may cancel sailings again. They remove container space from the market. Fewer available slots can help rebalance supply and demand, but the ship can still cost money while it sits idle. Eventually, every vessel reaches another financial question. Is keeping the ship still worth it? As vessels age, maintenance becomes more expensive, repairs become more frequent. Newer ships may consume less fuel, technology may make them more efficient, and eventually the old vessel may no longer generate enough income to justify its costs. At that point, the steel itself still has value. Sometimes the most profitable final voyage is the one that ends at a recycling yard, but the ship is still not the real business. The network is. A shipping line connects ports across repeating routes. The stronger that network becomes, the easier it can be to attract cargo, fill ships, spread operating costs, and offer customers more destinations. But cargo rarely flows equally in both directions. Containers can pile up in the wrong country. Export markets may need thousands of empty boxes. Shipping companies then have to move those containers again. No customer is paying for the empty space inside. This is one of the hidden inefficiencies of global shipping. To reduce it, carriers build hubs. Smaller feeder ships collect cargo from regional ports. They bring those containers to major terminals. There, the cargo is combined onto much larger vessels. The giant ship handles the major ocean route. Smaller vessels distribute the cargo around the edges of the network. That system improves scale. But every hub creates another vulnerability: waiting. A container ship only earns efficiently while it is moving cargo. If it sits outside a congested port for hours or days, many of its costs continue. Fuel may be lower, but crew costs remain. Financing remains. Insurance remains. Maintenance remains. And the vessel loses time that could have been spent on another paying voyage. For a shipping line, a stationary ship becomes an extremely expensive clock. Then come container-related charges. Leave a container inside the terminal too long, and demurrage charges can begin. Keep equipment outside the port beyond the allowed period, and detention charges can apply. These fees encourage customers to keep containers moving. They can also create another revenue stream for carriers when equipment remains stuck, and that reveals another part of the business. The headline, freight rate, is not necessarily the entire bill. Customers may also pay for terminal handling, documentation, equipment, related services, and other applicable charges. Individually, some of these amounts may appear small. Across thousands of containers, they can become significant. That is why ocean shipping can look unbelievably profitable from the outside. A carrier can generate billions in revenue, move millions of containers, operate massive fleets, and still keep only a relatively small portion as final profit. Fuel takes its share. Crews take their share. Ports take their share. Maintenance takes its share. Financing takes its share. Containers take their share. And empty repositioning takes another piece. The remaining margin is what the entire network is fighting to protect. And one of the biggest threats remains energy. When bunker fuel prices jump, the same voyage suddenly costs much more. The ship carries the same boxes. The freight rate may remain unchanged, but more money disappears into fuel. If the carrier cannot raise its prices quickly enough, profit can disappear. Fuel surcharges provide one layer of protection. The carrier passes part of the extra cost back to the customer. That prevents every energy shock from destroying the voyage margin. But fuel is only the beginning. Every voyage creates a chain of expenses. Crew, ports, maintenance insurance, containers technology, inland transportation, and the systems required to coordinate all of it. Customers aren't really paying for a ship. They're paying for a system that can move one box from where it is to where it needs to be. And shipping companies don't necessarily own every part of that system. They can charter ships, lease equipment, contract trucks, use third-party terminals, and outsource selected services. That allows them to expand capacity without purchasing every asset themselves. It also gives them more flexibility when demand changes. But ownership still offers an important advantage. The vessel itself can become more valuable. When global trade is strong and available, ships are scarce, charter rates rise. Buyers may pay more for existing vessels. An owner can therefore earn money by carrying cargo and potentially benefit from rising asset values at the same time, but the reverse is also true. When too many ships chase too little cargo, freight rates fall. Ships sail with empty capacity. Vessel values can decline, and an asset that once looked enormously valuable can become a financial burden. That is why shipping follows boom and bust cycles. Ships take years to build. Demand can change much faster. Sudden cargo surge can send freight rates and profits soaring. That encourages companies to order more vessels. Years later, those ships finally arrive. But demand may already have cooled. Now the industry has too much capacity. Freight rates fall, profit disappears, and the cycle begins again. Scale can make the cycle even more powerful. A large carrier can spread costs across more containers, offer more routes, provide more departures, keep vessels fuller, and negotiate better terms with ports and suppliers. Those advantages can lower the cost of moving each box. The savings can then be invested back into the network. But competitors have found another way to create scale. They can share ships. Instead of sending separate vessels that are only half full along the same route, multiple carriers can cooperate on selected services. Each company sells space to its own customers, but the containers may travel on the same vessel. That can improve utilization, expand network coverage, and reduce duplicated operating costs. Still, ships don't fill themselves. Behind every sailing is a massive sales operation. Sales teams negotiate with major exporters. Freight forwarders bring together cargo from thousands of smaller customers. Rates change constantly, because once a ship sails, every empty slot becomes lost revenue, and not every container pays the same price. Two identical boxes on the same ship can have completely different freight rates. A long-term contract customer may receive a lower rate in exchange for reliable volume. A last-minute customer may pay far more when capacity is scarce. So carriers are not simply trying to fill ships. They are trying to create the best possible combination of volume and price. And sometimes the cheaper container is still worth taking. Once a ship is sailing, many voyage costs are already committed. An empty slot earns nothing, but a container paying more than its incremental carrying cost can still contribute positive money. So a lower-priced box can be better than empty space. This creates the industry's central balancing act. Raise freight rates too much. Customers may leave. Cut prices too aggressively. The ship may fill while profits disappear. The goal is not the highest price. And it is not simply the fullest ship. It is the best combination of utilization and price. Then the final problem returns. Cargo rarely moves equally in both directions. A ship can carry thousands of full containers into one market and return with far fewer paying customers. The empty containers still have to be repositioned. Ships, trucks, terminals, people, all moving steel boxes that generate no freight revenue, and the clock keeps running. A vessel waiting outside a congested port can lose several days of productive time. The carrier loses the next voyage opportunity. The costs continue. That is why speed has to be carefully managed too. Faster travel consumes dramatically more fuel. Slower travel saves fuel but extends the voyage. Sometimes, the cheapest speed is the one that takes longer. That is the real economics of ocean shipping. Customers pay to move containers through a global network. Thousands of boxes become enormous revenue. But fuel, ships, crews, ports, containers, maintenance, financing, inland transport, and empty repositioning consume most of it. The shipping company makes money from the difference between what each box earns and what it costs to move that box. And that difference can become enormous when ships are full and freight rates are strong. It can disappear when capacity overwhelms demand. That is why the real business isn't the container. It isn't even the ship. It is the network. And the companies that understand how to price space, control capacity, manage fuel, keep ships moving, and balance empty equipment are the ones that survive the cycle. Because in ocean shipping, the greatest profits don't come from owning the most steel. They come from moving the most cargo at the right price with the lowest possible cost. Once you understand that, you'll never look at a shipping container the same way again.